Mummy, can we get Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, please?
No, we have Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link at home.
Zelda 2, The Adventures of Sideways Walking Link is probably an unfair comparison for Golvellius, but for the entire time I was playing it I couldn't get it out of my mind. There are a lot of similarities and a lot of differences, and while neither game is perfect, Zelda 2 ends up walking away as the game I'd rather be annoyed at, because Golvellius just has too many wonky attributes to really keep me engaged. We are getting ahead of ourselves though, so let's rewind. Golvellius was originally released in 1987 for the MSX. The following year, Sega licensed the franchise for the Master System. A new version was created with better graphics and a different layout to the original, and it was retitled Golvellius Valley of Doom. At the time of release, the game was fairly well received by critics, though not across the board. CVG magazine gave the game 84%, and the review is one of the most boring things I've ever read in my entire life. Essentially, he describes the first hour of gameplay and then goes on to say that the game is highly entertaining and a compulsive arcade adventure. Wrong. Going further down the list of magazines, we hit the game's lowest score of 66% from the Games Machine magazine, and the review is a far better read, and it's also eminently more quotable. First impressions are of a fairly mediocre game. Fortunately, Golvellius places equal emphasis on hack and slay and puzzles, a successful combination. Never mind the old ideas, formulae and presentation used by the game, bear Golvellius in mind if you want some brain teasing with your arcade action. And that, dear viewers, is close to the mark, so let's have a look at why. The game starts off with your green-haired protagonist entering a cave, meeting an old woman who tells you it's dangerous to go alone and that you should take this. Zelda. She gives you a sword and a pair of boots. I know what the sword is for because you use it approximately 1.5 million times per hour, but the boots? Nothing, as far as I can tell. Presumably our lead character didn't turn up there empty-footed, so maybe this old bat just thinks your current shoes are extremely unfashionable. I've no idea. From there you enter one of the first sideways scrolling areas, and you'll likely notice immediately that it controls wonkily. Stabbing in the air stops all movement, and our miniature Captain Planet lookalike can't even turn around. That's right, you are forced to face forward at all times. Did something slip past you? Tough shit, that's gone now. Unless you fancy jumping backwards over it to try and hit it, you'll just have to get on with your life. Enemies too feel like they've been programmed by someone half asleep. What is this dude doing? You just gotta sit there, yeah? Fair enough. Once you make it through the side-scrolling zone, you'll enter the overworld proper, and get used to this place because this is where you'll be restarting each and every time you die. No matter how far through the game you are, death puts you back here. I hope you enjoy the walking speed on offer because that doesn't change. Maybe should have swapped the boots for some running shoes or something. Your goal in the overworld is to work out where to go next, effectively. You wander the landscape, find random holes, go into these random holes, and then you'll either encounter an NPC or you'll encounter a level. Now, before we move on to anything else, we need to talk about these NPCs. We need to talk about them good. Directly from the manual, it states, "Know thy friends. Here are the friendly folk you will meet in the course of the game," and I can tell you now that is a goddamn lie. The NPCs in this game are some of the rudest, confusing, weirdest creatures you will ever meet in this life or the next. I was frequently baffled by their absolutely inane banter. So, here's my top 10 of weird things NPCs say.
If thou dost not defeat Bacula, thou canst not venture south. There are countless rocks in Rollick's cave.
It's a cave, obviously.
Didst thou see anything interesting? I have nothing to sell thee. Canst thou not spare a wee bit more? Nope, too late, never mind, I'm leaving. Bye, so long, adios. Why, thou art but a moron of the first class. Hit the road. I am Winkle. Thou want me to tell thee the password? Then I shall. Cheapskate, tightwad, thy purse must be rusty from lack of use. I love snow cones, crunch, crunch. I hate the head freeze headaches, though. Didst thou gold the ring of invisibility? The wise woman will have special items that you need to complete the game. They are kind, despite their sharp wit, but remember that you will have to pay for many of your items. All of the items, all of them. Outside the sword and the pair of boots you pick up at the beginning of the game, be prepared to splash the cash whenever you meet one of these miserable old gits. Invariably, they sell one of a few things. A health potion, which increases your overall health. A herb, which seems to refill a small portion of health just before you die. A crystal, which is a vital component to complete the game. A special item, like a sword or a shield, which are pretty much necessary to get any further. And, strangest of all, a Bible. A Bible which increases the amount of gold you can carry. Would a wallet or a bag or anything other than a Bible not have made more sense? A Bible? Why? We'll come back to Wise Old Woman and the reasons I hate her face later in the review, because next up we have Rio the Fairy. Rio is full of interesting hints and occasional bits of humour. She loves snow cones. Again, a lie. Rio is useful approximately 1 out of 10 times you encounter her. Sometimes she is absolutely essential because she'll be the only one to provide you with the information you need to work out how to progress further. Other times, she'll just be talking absolute shit. What are you on about, woman? Next up there is Annie, an angel who works for cold, hard cash. Give her some money and she'll restore some life, but I'm not sure what backwards part of heaven she comes from because she is rude as you like. She's also mostly pointless because there's someone else who will heal you, and they don't just heal you a little bit, they heal every single part of your health bar, and they do it for an extremely minor sum of money. And that person is Randar. What is Randar? Why is Randar? Oh, there's still plenty more people to discover. Dina will give you some gold in exchange for some of your health. She barely gives you anything, so don't bother. And then there's Winkle. Winkle. She gives you a password you can use to continue the game from where you left off. This sounds useful, but the game gives you a password when you die, meaning Winkle's one job is entirely pointless. That's all of the characters, I'm sure you'll be pleased to know, and the reason I've painstakingly taken you through this long meet and greet with random-ass looking nonsense spouters is because, well, that's mostly what this game is. You wander the overworld map, you fight monsters until a hole appears, you climb down that hole, and you find out who lives there. Ideally, what you'll want is the old woman who will sell you the items you need to progress, but more often than not, it's someone completely useless. Making a note of which characters are where is practically essential if you don't want to spend most of your game time talking to the same people over and over again because you forgot you'd already been down this particular dank hole. And no, I have no idea why they all live in a hole. To compound matters, the fighting mechanics on the overworld section are horrid. There's no two ways about it, they simply don't work well enough to provide any enjoyment. You are confined to 4 cardinal directions, up, down, left and right. That applies to movement and that applies to attacking. But the enemies aren't confined to that. Some enemies come in at you from an angle. Some enemies are just so goddamn fast that you barely get a chance to shit your pants before they smother you to death. Sometimes it can take multiple hits to down an enemy, and the damage your hits do seems to be related to how long you hold the attack button down. It feels unintuitive. Rapidly slashing at enemies seems, at first, like the correct method to take, but you soon realise that your best bet is to instead hold your sword out and just place it on an enemy's head for a while until they explode.
The only tactic you can really employ here is to find yourself a nice little area to funnel the enemies into and attack them. That only works with enemies who move in one of 4 directions, mind. If they come at you from an angle or fly, well, good luck, I guess. Now you may well be thinking, but Rose-Tinted Spectrum, in the original Zelda, you could only move in 4 directions, so why is this any different? And it's lucky that you're thinking that, because that was literally what I was going to bring up next. In the original Zelda, which this overhead section probably most resembles, Link's attack is just as uselessly awkward to aim, but it's supplemented by a number of things. There are multiple weapons you can pick up on your journey and use, enemies piss out health constantly, and there's pushback on most enemies when you hit them, giving you breathing room and a chance to re-maneuver. In Golvellius, health pickups rarely ever appear. I also had no idea what one was the first time it dropped because they'd chosen to represent health as some sort of blue thing. There's also no pushback on enemies when you hit them, they just pause for a moment. There's also no other weapons you can employ because every single item you gain in the game is passive. You are stuck with your one attack throughout. Zelda 2 allows you to wipe out all the enemies on a screen and they won't respawn until you re-enter that screen. In Golvellius, there's no such luck. They respawn endlessly, meaning you have to either slowly make your way to where you need to be, killing things as you go, or you just have to soak up that damage and hope you can find whatever the hell this guy is again to fill your health back up. It's sloppy, and the reason I've talked about it so long is because that's what you do for the vast majority of the game. You walk the land, you kill enemies until hopefully a hole appears, you go in that hole, you realise for the 13th time that you've already been in this hole, and then you go on to the next screen and do it again. Occasionally you'll be given a clue to a puzzle, and these sections at least give you something else to ponder while you're slowly losing the will to live. In order to find this dank hole, for instance, I had to hit a gravestone, and the only way I knew I needed to do that was because this useless idiot told me I probably had to do that. She didn't say which one, of course, I just got lucky, but still, at least there's a change of pace, eh? I'm not quite done complaining about the overworld yet though, because we need to talk about that basic gameplay loop a little more. The reason you're wandering the world punching monsters until holes appear is probably because you're trying to find this stupid old woman. She's the only one who will sell you items that are going to be of any use, and really, you need to find all of them. You'll quickly realise that the price of her items ramps up quite rapidly, and the shield in particular is an early stumbling block. It costs 8 grand, and you'll likely be able to carry a maximum amount of gold of, say, 2 grand. That means you need to find Bibles. So off you go on your great Bible adventure, but you can't find any more in this area, so you have to move on to the later areas, which are incredibly tough, especially as you don't seem to have a damn shield. But after a lot of pain and anguish, you finally have the ability to carry at least 8 grand. So then you need to grind, you need to kill monsters to build up your gold, but you can't see how much gold you have on the main screen, so you have to pause every minute or so just to see how much you have, and then finally you have that 8 grand, but now you need to walk all the way back to where the old woman was selling the shield, buy the shield, and then you need to walk all the way back again. The game does this a lot. It's a game that's not afraid to waste your time by making you slowly wander about, and you'll be hoping beyond hope that you'll finally reach another section that isn't this overworld. And there is, in fact, another type of gameplay here, one different to the side-scrolling sections. These are top-down areas where the screen constantly pushes onwards. These are fine. There's not a great deal to say about them aside from the fact that you really need to keep yourself ahead of the maze, because if you do end up falling too far back or getting trapped, you just have to start all over again. These areas typically lead up to a boss fight, and the boss fights are, again, not great. Much like the overworld segments, they essentially involve moving into a position and pressing attack until they die. That description sounds pretty base, but it accurately describes the excitement level you'll reach when fighting a boss. They are simply there. Once the boss is dead, congratulations, you now have to scour the overworld map to try and work out 1, which new area has opened up, and 2, which hole the old woman is hiding in, who will sell you the crystal that you need in order to complete the game. Needless to say, it didn't take very long before my attention span with Golvellius fell off a cliff edge. It's hard, really, to get yourself in the mindset of what this game would have been like to play at the time. Chances are I probably would have loved it on release. I had the time, the patience, and the inclination to continue on with a game like this because children have literally nothing better to do with their lives than keep hammering away at something that's even mediocre. And that's what the game screams out at me in the end. A mediocre smear of annoyance that lies on top of a game that could have actually been pretty good, but exploding myself for the umpteenth time and finding myself back at the entrance, knowing I'd have to walk all the way back to where I'd gotten to, and having to do the same monotonous wandering, the grinding, trying to work out clues that haven't actually been translated correctly. Push the blue rock, she says, push the blue rock. There are multiple blue rocks, and you don't push it, you hit it 5 times with your sword, you stupid winged gobshite. In terms of a recommendation, it's going to come down to your ability to deal with all of the things I've mentioned here, because for me, all of these little issues just pile up and up and up to the point where every single thing you have to do in the game is, at best, a nuisance. I didn't like the combat, I didn't like the puzzles, I didn't like the reliance on constant, aimless wandering. But on the flip side, if you're a Master System collector, there's really not an awful lot similar to Golvellius. Perhaps if you're an incredibly forgiving RPG enthusiast, you'll get on a lot better than I did.